Oh, good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back at our second session for the day. This is a fireside chat between me and Dr. Doris Viljoen. Dr. Doris is the head of the Institute for Futures Research at the Stellenbosch Business School in Bellville. Doris, welcome. We are very honored to have you here with us.
Thank you very much, Odie, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. But first, I want to say this is such a beautiful initiative to spend 3 days
Mm.
thinking about competition and everything. I think this is an amazing
Yeah.
initiative. Well done.
Thank you so much, Doris. Really appreciate it. Um, Regulatory frameworks, by their nature, often lean on historical data and adopting a backward looking lens to assess market dynamics. Yet, as markets rapidly evolve, driven by technological innovation, shifting consumer behaviors, and global economic forces, effective competition analysis demands a forward looking approach. Merger reviews, in particular, are tasked with the anticipation of the impact of the merger on competition and innovation and consumers. However, a closer examination reveals a gap. While the mantra of merger analysis emphasizes foresight, we all know the chant merger analysis is forward looking. The methodologies employed by competition authorities do not empower them, in our view, to analyze facts in different time segments. This omission carries significant risks. Without forward looking tools, a couple of things can happen. Authorities may make decisions with devastating market consequences, and the remedies designed to address competitive harms may prove ineffective, or worse, they may become drivers of worst case scenarios. The concern with the time-bound nature of competition analysis is not only a personal one. 3 years ago, at an ACER conference in Malawi, a prominent lawyer at a prominent law firm said in his concluding remarks, competition authorities must be futurists. Today, we will explore with Dr. Doris whether futures methods could enhance decision-making in merger context. By examining these issues, we aim to shed light on how competition authorities can better anticipate and shape the markets of tomorrow. So let us all begin dealing with this critical conversation. Thanks again, lieve Doris. Can you just take the audience through what future studies entails and its different application? In other words, just set the scene for this audience who is not familiar with future studies.
Well, first, I have to say, I really like that comment by the lawyer. Wow,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
a true visionary, man. I'm not biased. You can hear, I'm not biased. So future studies is a field of research. It's a formal field of research. It is taught at quite a few places across the world and here in Africa at Stellenbosch Business School, where we have academic programs in future studies. But let's talk about the field first. The field of future studies, and I'm going to take just one sidebar on that. You will hear that I'm using the plural, futures studies. And that in the name of the field is already embedded that stance of believing that wherever we stand in the present, we can imagine multiple futures. And that is more or less what the field tries to do, to create tools and techniques to facilitate imagining in a responsible manner alternative futures over a longer time horizon. So we stretch the time horizon, we think about the longer future, and we think about multiple alternatives that are explored in a responsible manner. So if we think about a foresight project, it means that the participants will be on a journey from sensing what is moving on to making sense, understanding really the deep drivers of what is moving and shifting, and then change making to understand where this could go and what we would prefer happening. Because, I mean, wherever we stand in the present, we can imagine those alternatives. Seeds of those futures already exist that we can research, we can imagine how they can develop, and we co-create the future by the policies we create, the decisions we make, that co-creates the future. So from that sense, I so agree with that lawyer. Competition regulators have to be futurists. They have to imagine how the industry could evolve and how a certain merger or acquisition could influence how a certain industry and adjacent industries could evolve. And in that sense, they cannot just assess what mattered or what matters at the moment, but they have to consider what will matter next, what is going to be important next, and how a certain activity could influence what matters next. And for that, future studies is ideally situated.
Yes, thank you, Doris. And can you share with the audience some of the projects that you have dealt with that looked specifically at markets?
We do that more or less on a continuous basis, but I'll pick two of the recent ones. One, we considered futures for agricultural employment in South Africa. Now, initially, the client said, can you help us to think about on-farm employment? And then we said, you know what, we'll take your money, but we already know on-farm employment is probably going to reduce over the next 10 years or so, given tech and everything. But if we look at the whole value chain, then we can talk about potential more and other employment things. And especially in that one of the pivots that we were identifying was the structure of that chain. Would it be more open with access to people, or will it be more closed so that only the big guys can rule? And I mean, in that kind of sense, one of the big drivers that we considered was the activities of what would be allowed or not allowed. So in that set of scenarios, how we view competition, how we regulate competition came out really strongly. Another one that had a little bit of a big slap of mergers and acquisitions in it was one that we did for a global M&A company, TransLink Corporate Finance. A few years ago, they turned 50 and they wanted to give a gift to the world, to all of their clients, and they asked us to develop scenarios for each of 5 sectors that they were involved in. So we identified key factors, analyzed them, developed scenarios, but also in each of the scenarios, we then considered what kinds of mergers and acquisitions would take place in those different scenarios. I believe that is still available in the public domain. So if you go to the TransLink website, you can still find those scenarios. They are still kept alive, even I think it's about 2 years since we have done them. And that was an exciting activity for us, because no matter how good or bad perceived the scenario was, there was always room for mergers and acquisitions, just different kinds of the mergers and acquisitions.
Yes. Yeah, that is quite interesting. And it's great that you are working so much on the real life commercial impact of markets. And Doris, have you been surprised by some of the findings that you have made in the past? Or is it fairly predictable what you might find?
No. It is so beautiful to be part of that process and design the process for emergence, so that new insights, because that's what thinking about the longer future should be, that we get out of the way and allow participants to imagine things. So I think a while ago, just after those June, July riots, people were sort of shaken and said, whoa, now we better have, and the request that we got from a really large client was to have a look at their risk register, to make sure that everything that is on there, that should be on there, is on there. So that was the brief. We have to identify and populate the risk register. So we created this workshop. We called it Let's Go Dark. And we thought into a really bad dystopian scenario of a future South Africa. We organized really good snacks to help with all the trauma and everything. But what came out of that workshop as a surprise was that organization, because we designed the workshop in such a manner to say, well, okay, let's look at your strategy, let's look at your business model, what is working, what is not working, so that we could identify potential risks. That was the design. But what happened, they did populate the risk register, but they also identified and designed a new product that they could put into the market based on that activity. And that product is out there. If I see the TV ad for it, then I just giggle and think, oh, wow. I knew you when you would have scribble on a flip chart. But anyway, that was a nice and meaningful surprise. There was another one. A large multinational organization actually just wanted to validate their intention to cease their operations in a large number of African countries. And they said, well, just take us through an activity where you just talk us through potential futures for each of these countries. And let us just have a little bit of talk about the futures of each of those countries, because we just want to say, yes, we've done our due diligence. We know that's not a country we want to do business in. So, and that's what we did. We just scraped together literally public domain information and everything like that. And we just facilitated a process where they thought about what to do. And the end result of that, I mean, it was, in the beginning, I thought, sure, this is really tough now. We're helping these people to make this decision. But I mean, we always allow for an open process and open discussions and everything. So what happened was that of all of the countries that they decided to exit, the end result was that for 2 of the countries, they merged their operations there. So no exit, but just combine. And for 4 of the countries, to still remain there with the same, and for 2 other countries to actually increase the business that they plan on doing there. So they wanted to exit all of those, but they remained. So the only one was merging 2 of the ones that they wanted to exit into one office, and for the others, remain there or do more business. That was a very nice and unexpected surprise of just thinking through things.
Yes. And it makes me think that if a competition authority can also adopt this view, then they can also have a better idea of what's going to happen in this particular market. So it is not something that's only working for corporate. It sounds as if there is a good application to know what's going to happen in this field, plus minus, because then at least you are on par with what's being done at a corporate in relation to future sensing.
And I think if commissions get that traditional lag of the regulation just following really long after, just lagging, I think we must try to make that lag space a little bit smaller.
Exactly.
We don't have the luxury of keeping, because in the past technologies developed slower, adoption was slower, everything's faster now. To even have the same lag just means that we actually, in real sense, a lot further behind in regulating certain spaces. So we have to try and make that space smaller, and I think futures thinking can help with that.
Yes, thanks so much, Doris. When we conduct a merger analysis, competition authorities must consider a lot of factors. I'm quickly running through that. It's the actual and potential level of import competition in a market, the ease of entry into a market, including tariff barriers, regulatory barriers, the level and trends of concentration, the history of collusion in the market, the degree of countervailing power, dynamic characteristics, the nature and extent of vertical integration, whether the business is likely to fail, whether a merger will result in a removal of an effective competitor, whether the party to a merger is related to another firm, any other mergers that has been done, in other words, the creeping merger factor. And some of these factors lend themselves to some kind of a dynamic analysis, what's going to happen next year or the year after that. But we are still mostly staying in this current time segment, and we are not really considering the next 3 to 10 years. with each of the different scenarios that can happen over the next 3 to 10 years. So what is the use of going through this? I will never forget at one point, I told some of my bosses in the past, we must involve the IFR at our company. And he said, but each year at our partners conference, there's a futurist, and they come with these predictions, and they always get it wrong. Next year, when we are here and we look at the predictions of last year, nothing happened. Well, none of the predictions happened. So, can you explain to us just a little bit what is the use of going down this route? Can one really conjecture? Will it make a difference?
I have 7 different responses there. So, in future studies, we're not trying to predict. We're trying to sensitize, and we're trying to, in a responsible manner, to develop alternatives, help people to spend a little bit of mental rehearsal time in those alternatives, those scenarios. And then the benefit of having done that mental rehearsal, having those mental images, memories of the future then, to help, that would help them in making today's and tomorrow's decisions. Now, when we make claims about the future, for many of those, we really would like to be wrong, especially the ones that we see could be harmful. So if people then listen to us and act, then we're wrong. But we're very happy to be wrong about that. All right, that's just a side note. But then we must also look at what people are doing when they're thinking about the future. They build models. I love models. I'm a model freak. I really like models, but we must remember what a model needs. A model needs good, clean data.
Yeah.
And that comes from the past, however long. Good, clean data. And what they then do is to then extrapolate, which is not bad, but it has the base assumption that the relationship between the things that you've built into the model, that the relationships are going to stay the same, and that whatever has happened in the past will continue happening in the future. And then they say, okay, we're going to do a +2 and a -3. And then they call that scenarios, which is just alternative projections. It is not really scenarios, or it is scenarios technically, but it doesn't say everything. Because usually when we build a model, what we have to take out of the model, because it wants to make the model wobble, are those things that are very volatile, that we don't have good, clean, long existing data for. And those are the things that in the future may come to surprise us.
Yes.
So if we take that model, we build the model, we do the projections, and we take those uncertain things and we build scenarios with the uncertain things and put the two together and then start making decisions. That comes from a way better informed base than just the model with its projections of where it could go. Because then we're also taking account of those really deep uncertainties, the very volatile things that we know we had to take out of the model, because otherwise the model wouldn't have run. But then both of those are in our story and in our frame when we think about the future.
Right, thanks. Thank you, Doris. And can you take us through the process of scenario planning? And the reason why I'm asking that is that I've referred to the situation where competition authority only focuses on the current time segment. And if you can explain to us, what would it entail basically? And before we control for time, because time is an issue at the competition, well, at any competition authority, they have a statutory time limit within which to conduct any investigation, and it's complex as it is. Before we get to that type of censoring, can you tell us how would one go about in explaining or in getting to different scenarios over, let's say, the next 3 to 10 years? What does that entail?
I really like a key factor-based approach. There are multiple approaches to developing scenarios, but especially if we think about the potential development of an industry or a certain geography or something, a key factor-based approach works really well. So if that more or less falls out in 5 phases. So in the first phase, you really do detailed scoping, really understand what it is that you're going to think about, the time horizon, everything that should be integrated, that we must include and exclude in our analysis. And then we identify key factors that could influence this situation over the time horizon and within this geography. Because say, for instance, we think about the textile industry, it's going to be different factors would influence the textile industry in Malawi than in the Western Cape. So we must be very specific in identifying those factors that could influence. And in terms of time horizons, if we have a 3-year time horizon, different factors would be at play than when we have a 30-year time horizon. So being sensitive to the geography and to the time horizon and to the industry that we are thinking about. And then while I'm saying industry, to not forget about potential adjacent industries, because we have seen interesting things happening on the touch points between industries, so that we don't create blind spots by just so narrowly focusing on one industry that a development in the next door industry just cuts this one and make it die anyway. So identifying the key factors is the second phase. And then we need to know these factors so that we understand the relative importance of the different factors. So a deep analysis phase, understanding, and you know what? The analysis of the factors leads to the building of the scenarios, but those conversations where people are having, and that's where stakeholder involvement is so important. Where you have people actually considering really talking about the potential influence of the factors on each other. That is where a deep understanding develops of those intricacies of how the factors influence each other, and the complexity really lands for people. We always talk about the effectiveness and the effectiveness of futures thinking. Now, effective, you go through the process, you follow the correct procedure, and you develop scenarios. The effectiveness is what happens in the minds of the people that participated in the process. And for stakeholders, that is extremely important, because they walk away with just a different way of understanding their task, the industry, everything that is happening. Okay, but I'm falling into my own story. First is detailed scoping, then identifying the factors, then analyzing the factors. After the analysis phase, we know the factors well. So then you know which ones are the main actors in the story and which ones are the support actors. From the main actors, they usually, if you want to develop a 2x2, that's where you get the 2 pivots from. You develop scenario narratives, nice, deep, rich narratives, so that the users of the scenarios really understand why the scenarios are different, what the different roles are from potential actors in the stories. So developing deep narratives so that people understand how the future folds out. And then the very important final phase is the transfer, sharing the scenarios with everybody that needs to know in a format that they could appreciate. So the 5 phases for developing a scenario.
Yes, and what is also quite interesting is that the 4 scenarios need not necessarily be a good one, a very bad one, and 2 intermediate ones. It really depends on the question that you ask people. So all of them can be bad, all of them can be good, all of them can have a particular regulatory requirement. So that is, it depends on the particular issue at hand.
We just thought about the futures of the internet, and we developed a dystopian one. We call that Broken Net. And then 2 really good ones, but one where tech is thriving, and the other one where humans are more human focused, and the other one more tech focused, but two good ones and one bad one. So yeah, and it doesn't have to be a 2x2. We can make many other different ones.
Yes, that's right. And it sounds very relevant on a continent where humans and work and employment is something that must be taken into account. So what are the types of things that we must do for this scenario to play out? It's because one can be very, very proactive also in steering policy or regulatory changes if you know where you want to be. Thank you, Doris. If I can revert to the merger example, after the conducting of such a scenario exercise, I think one would then have a good idea of the types of futures that may occur pursuant to a particular merger decision and how remedies may perform under each of the different scenarios, and whether some remedies must be adopted at all or should rather be replaced with something else in order to get more bang for your buck, basically, things like that. And I think at another level, additional wins may include much greater ownership by the authorities for the quality of remedies that they're imposing, for example, to ensure that the positive effects of a remedy continue long after the official remedy had stopped. In other words, ensuring that there's that, what is that word, that spontaneous organization being embedded in a remedy. And also a good understanding of potential tipping points in Africa, because our markets are more eager to tip because we are much more constrained than some of the developed markets. So just quickly, Doris, how long does it normally take to go through this scenario planning, just for purposes of our audience?
Well, if I have the luxury, so to do a really thorough process, about 6 to 8 months. Recently, I spoke to our compatriots in Finland, and they don't even take on a project if it has to be done faster than 18 months. And I said, wow, that's never going to happen in our world. I mean, 18 months. So 6 to 8 for a really deep and thorough process. For example, that one that we've done for the agricultural sector that ran for over a period of about 8 months. But very recently, literally like 2 weeks ago, from start to end was a 3-week process. Week process. But the organization had really good internal information that they could give us. So we had briefing sessions with the leadership, scanning and identifying factors where many of the factors came from their internal documents because they had a very good and very recently done situational analysis, and then 2 days of scenario planning, and it rendered a beautiful result in the end. The shortest one that we've done was less than a day, 4 or 5 hours, where you put, and there is a specific scenario method for that, where you put experts in the room and you expect them to bring their cleverness. So what I do is to bring the futures or the foresight methodology. They have the cleverness, we think together. And that you can actually do in less than a day. A full day is nice, but we've done it in a 5-hour session, produce scenarios that they can learn from.
Yes, that's right. And one might also consider a situation where one would probably not do a scenario planning exercise or the scenario development exercise in relation to each merger, for example, because there are quite a number of them, but to identify the priority industries of a competition authority, because there are about 4 to 5 or 6 or 7, depending on the authority. And if those things could be really well interrogated, that may not be a bad idea to do that. Years ago, there were...
It could be very interesting as well.
Absolutely,
Imagine.
Absolutely.
And meaningful, I think.
Oh, yes. The OECD did a survey a couple of years ago, and they asked the competition authorities, how they deal with quantitative data. Do they feel comfortable with that? And the answer was yes. And they asked them, how are you comfortable with dealing with qualitative data? And virtually all of them said no. And to me, that was one of the great benefits of future studies, because one starts to create that ability to make sense of qualitative things that happen. What are some of the other ancillary benefits in your mind that happens in the hearts and in the minds of people dealing with these types of analysis on a frequent basis?
I think the direct benefit is that they see the world differently.
Yeah.
I think immediately after a scenario activity, you listen to the news in a different manner. You process information in a different manner. People are more comfortable and okay with ambiguity and uncertainty. They're more willing to step into that uncertainty and say, we know that this is very, in systems thinking, they talk about the mess. It's the whole connected system, and they're more willing to step into the mess. And that is what we need of leaders today, to be willing to acknowledge the mess and say, okay, this is a very complex system. I'm going to step into that and try to understand and try to imagine. And that just that comfort level that is increased is already a beautiful benefit. They have different memories of the future. Having gone through the scenario activity, they've imagined different futures. So when something starts emerging, they see it sooner. And they say, I remember you. We spoke about you.
Wow.
So what happens is that they actually recognize shifts faster, and that therefore they can act faster. And that is what we want. We want people to see sooner and act faster. They're also more willing to enter into conversations, even with people that are from multiple viewpoints, because the scenario process just that is just how it rolls, kind of. You need people with multiple different viewpoints to co-create the future together. And then they realize, you know what, we can actually speak to each other. Exactly. That is one of the most frequently found feedbacks that we get after workshops, because we purposefully try to put people that do not agree with each other into the room. It's hard on the facilitator, I have to say, but it's better for the process. And what we then hear from them is that, you know what, we've never spoken to each other before. And now we realize that we can actually speak together. We can plan together. We can do things together. So I think, and just that kind of openness is what our country and our continent needs, that ability to step in, to create a conversation, to think together about a future. A shared future.
Thank you, Doris. And it sounds as if that is something from which the competition authorities and the practitioners could benefit, because I think sometimes they could also not really speaking to each other, and then unless they must, but to start imagining the same futures, I think that could also play a very important role in that relationship. And I hear what you say regarding uncertainty. People are very scared of uncertainty, and one normally hears that from any stage, but uncertainty is a resource that you can use to your advantage.
In the uncertainty is a lot of opportunity as well. We tend to think of uncertainty as the place of potential risk, but we forget that inside the uncertainty sits all of the opportunity as well. And if we can see the opportunity earlier, we have time to create something that could help us to benefit from that potential opportunity. If we just wait until it's right here, it's going to slap us in the face. Then an opportunity turns into a risk.
That's right. Oh, Doris, I'm mindful that you must leave us, unfortunately, now. Doris must go and teach a class at the IFR. Doris, it was a fantastic opportunity and a wonderful pleasure to host you at our conference. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and let's see whether we can put something together and maybe approach some of the competition authorities, because I think there's so much value in the work that you do, and thank you for taking care of futures for for us, not only for South Africa, but for Africa. Doris and the team also has an Africa team for those of you who are interested. And if you'd like to reach out to Doris, you can just give me a call and I'll put you in contact with Doris.